with these features. Wait, like this. Okay. I'm trying to read the novel entitled Bridgerton. Bridgerton the Sixth. This is the story about Francesca Bridgerton. Okay.
About Francesca.
Okay. Beautiful.
About Francesca.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So you can hear me clearly, I hope. Yeah, I'm going to start reading this. Chapter 11. I have heard from Michael 3 times actually. I have not yet responded. You would be disappointed in me, I'm sure, but from the Countess of Kilmartin to her deceased husband, 10 months after Michael's departure for India, crumpled with a muttered, "This is madness," and tossed in the fire. Okay, let's continue. Michael had spotted Francesca's moment he'd entered the ballroom. She was standing at the far side of the room, chatting with her sisters, wearing a blue gown and new hairstyle, and he noticed the instant she left as well, exiting through the door in the northwest wall, presumably to go to the ladies' retiring room, which he knew was just down the hall. Worst of all, he was quite certain. Worst of all, he was quite certain he would equally aware of her return, even though he was conversing with about a dozen other ladies, all of whom thought he was giving their little gathering his full attention. It was like a sickness with him, a sixth sense. He couldn't be in a room with Francesca and not know where she was. It had been like this since the moment that met. And the only thing that made it bearable was that she hadn't a clue. It was one of the things he had most enjoyed about India. She wasn't there, he never had to be aware of her. But she's haunted him still. Every now and then he'd catch a glimpse of chestnut hair that caught the candlelight as her state. Or someone would laugh and for a split second it sounded like hers. His breath would catch and he would look for her, even though he knew she wasn't there. It was hell and usually worthy of stiff drink, or a night spent with his latest paramour, or both. But that was over, and now he was back in London, and he was surprised by how easy it was to fall into his old role as the devil-may-care charmer. Nothing much had changed in town. Oh, some of the faces were different, but the aggregate sum of the tone was the same. Hello, Jerica. Waalaikumsalam. Lady Bridgerton's birthday feast was much as he had anticipated, although he had to admit that he was a little taken aback at the level of curiosity aroused by his reappearance in London. It seems the merry rake had become a dashing and The first 15 minutes of his arrival he had been accosted by no fewer than 8. No, Max, that 9. Mustn't forget Lady Bridgerton herself, society matrons, as eager to court his favor and of course introduce him to their lovely unattached daughter. Okay, so this is actually the first time for me to use this feature on YouTube. Welcome. I hope it's okay for you. What if I want to? Sometimes I want to mute, but how to do it? Okay, so now let me continue to make it a bit bigger. Yes. He wasn't quite sure if it was amusing or hell. Amusing, he decided, for now at least. By next week, he had no doubt it would be hell. After another 15 minutes of reintroduction, and only slightly veiled proposition, thankfully by a widow, and not one of the debutants or then mothers, he announced his intention to look at his hostess and excused himself from the crowd. And then there she was, Francesca, halfway across the room, of course, which meant he'd have to make this way through punishing crowds if he wanted to speak with her. She looked breathtakingly lovely in a deep blue gown, and he realized that for all her talk about buying herself a new wardrobe, this was the first he'd seen her out of her half-mourning colors. Then it hit him again. She was finally out of mourning. She would remarry. She would laugh and flirt and wear blue and find a husband. And it would probably all happen in the space of a month. Once she made clear intention to remarry, the man would be beating down her door. How could anyone not want to marry her? She might not have. She might not have been as youthful as the other women looking for husband, but she had something the younger debutants lacked: a sparkle, vivacity, a gleam or intelligence in her eyes that brought something extra to her beauty. She was still alone. She was still alone, standing in the doorway. Amazingly, no one else seemed to have noticed her entrance. So Michael decided to brave the crowd and make his way to her. But she saw him first, and although she did not exactly smile, her lips curved and her eyes flashed with recognition as she walked to him, his breath caught. It shouldn't have surprised him, and yet it did. Every time he thought he knew everything about her, had unwillingly memorized every last detail, something inside her flickered and changed, and he felt himself falling anew. Ludi, Assalamualaikum Hadir Bu Guru. Thank you very much, Ludi. Ini saya lagi pertama kali pakai feature ini ya, ternyata bisa seperti ini ya. Okay, I'm so happy. Okay, let me continue. He would never escape her, this woman. He would never escape her. And he could never have her, even with John gone. It was impossible, quite simply wrong. There was no much there. Too much had happened. Too much had happened. Mana tadi? Too much had happened, and he would never be able to shake the feeling that she had somehow stolen her. Or worse, that he had wished for this, that he had wanted John gone and out of the way, wanted the title and Francesca and everything else. He closed the distance between them, meeting her halfway. Francesca, he murmured, making his voice smooth and personable. It's a delight to see you, and you as well, she replied. She smiled, but it was in an amused sort of fashion, and he had the unexpected sense that she was mocking him. But there seemed little to be gained by. By pointing this out, it would only demonstrate how attuned he was to her every expression. And so he just said, "Have you enjoying yourself?" "Of course, have you?" "Of course," she quirked a brow. "Even in your present state of solitude?" "I beg your pardon." She shrugged carelessly. "The last I saw you, you were surrounded by women." "If you saw me, why didn't you come over to save me?" "Save you," she said with a laugh. "Anyone could see that you were enjoying yourself." "Is that so?" "Oh, please, Michael," she said, giving him a pointed glance. "You live to flirt and seduce. In that order?" She shrugged. "You're not the Mary Rake for nothing." He felt his jaw clamping together. Her comment rankled, and then the fact that it did rankled some more. She studied his face closely enough to make him want to squirm with discomfort, and then her aunt erupted into a smile. "You don't like it," she said slowly, almost breathless with the realization. "Oh my heavens, you don't like it." She looked as if she'd just experienced epiphany of biblical proportions, but as the whole thing was at his expense, all he could do was scowl. Then she laughed, which made it even worse. "Oh my," she said, actually holding her hand to her belly in mirth. "You felt like a fox at a hunt, and you don't like it one bit." "Oh, this is simply too much. After all the women's you've chased." She had it all wrong, of course. He didn't much care one way or another than the society's matron had labeled him the season's biggest catch and were pursuing him accordingly. That was just the sort of thing it was easy to maintain a sense of humor over. He didn't care if they called him the merry rake. He didn't care if they thought him a worthless seducer. Ya, ini tulisannya kecil-kecil banget because pakai HP ya. Ya, kalau pakai harusnya pakai tablet, but tadi tabletnya tidak apa namanya? Tidak bisa digunakan untuk live. Wait, I think I need to stand up. Okay, not this high, I think. I'm going to practice reading by standing. And please don't give me offensive comments. And thank you very much for your cooperation by not giving me any offensive comments. Yes. Yeah, okay, yeah. It is better, I think. All right. Let me continue. Hi juga Lodi. Thank you for still being here ya Lodi ya. All right, I'm going to continue reading, yeah. But when Francesca said the same thing, it was like acid. And the worst of it was, he had no one to blame but himself. He had cultivated his reputation for years, spent countless, okay, spent countless hours teasing and flirting, and then making sure Francesca saw so she would never guess the truth. The text is very small, yeah, betul. Yeah, you were right, Ludi. Yeah, because it's, I use a mobile phone, so the text is very small. Yeah. And but if I use it, if I check it on my tablet, it's not really small actually. But yeah, okay. It's okay, let me do my best here. I'm just learning this feature actually, yeah? Let me try. Yeah. And maybe he had done it for himself too, because he was the merryweather. At least he was something. The alternative was to be nothing but a pathetic fool, hopelessly in love with another man's wife. And hell, he was good at being the man who could seduce with a smile. He might as well have something in life he could succeed at. You can't say, I didn't want you, Francesca said, sounding very pleased with herself. It's not so bad. Oh, in the Indonesia Raya ya. This is Indonesia Raya time. Sanamu aku berdiri. Yeah. So that's the Indonesia Raya time, yeah. Yeah, yeah, lucky me because my house is near at a school, so I can hear the Indonesia Raya time if I'm at home. Okay, now let me continue. It's not so bad surrounding oneself with beautiful women, he said, mostly to irritate her. Even better when it comes about so effortlessly. It worked because her face pinched just a bit around the mouth. I'm sure it's more than delightful, but you must be careful not to forget yourself, she said sharply. These are not your usual women. I wasn't aware I had usual women. You know exactly what I mean, Michael. Others may have called you a complete rough, yeah. But I know you better than that. Oh, really? And he almost laughed. She thought she knew him so well, but she knew nothing. She'd never know the full truth. You had standards 4 years ago, she continued. You never seduced anyone who would be irreparably hurt by your actions. And what makes you think I'm about to start now? Oh, I don't think you'd do anything like that on purpose, she said. But before, you never even associated with with young women looking for marriage. There wasn't even the possibility that you might make a misstep and accidentally ruin one of them. The vague, prickling sense of irritation that had been shimmering within him began to grow and boil. Who do you think I am, Francesca? He asked, his entire body stiff with something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He hated that she thought this of him, hated it. Michael, do you really think me so dim that I might accidentally ruin a young lady's reputation? Her lips parted, then quivered slightly before she replied. Not dim, Michael, of course not, but careless then, he bit off. No, not that either. I just think, what, Francesca? He asked ruthlessly. What do you think of me? I think you were one of the finest men I know. Hi, Slamet. I'm on a reading session. Yeah, Slamet, yeah. She said softly. Damned. Trust her to unman him with a single sentence. He stared at her, just stared at her, trying to figure out what the hell she'd meant by that. I do, she said with a shrug, but I also think you're foolish, and I think you can be fickle, and I think you're going to break more hearts this spring than I'll be able to count. Where have you been? Um, so I just stay at home today because I don't have any class for today. I stay at home. I take care of my family at home, cook for my husband, and after that, work on this channel because I want to be serious and I want to work on Instagram later. I do, she said with a shrug, but I also think you're foolish, and I think you can be fickle, and I think you're going to break more hearts this spring than I'll be able to count. It isn't your job to count them, he said, his voice quiet and hard. No, it isn't it? She looked over him and smiled wryly. But I'm going to end up doing it at the same, won't I? And why is that? New from China. Hello from China. Hello, hi. Nice to meet you. Would you like to like and subscribe to my channel? Thank you very much. She didn't seem to have an answer to that. And then, just when he was sure She would say no more, she whispered, because I won't be able to stop myself. 谢谢. Okay. Thank you from China. And what is your name? Because I can't read your name. Your name is in Chinese character, Chinese letter. I don't speak Chinese. Several seconds passed. They just stood there, their backs to the wall, looking for all the words as if they were just watching the party. Finally, Francesca broke the silence and said, "You should dance." He turned to her. "With you?" "Yes, once at least, but you should also dance with someone eligible, someone you might marry." Someone he might marry, anyone but her. It will signal to society that you were at least open to the possibility of matrimony, Francesca added. When he made no comment, she asked, "Aren't you open to matrimony?" "Yes." Hi, okay. Thank you, Ludi, for speaking to my Chinese audience. Yes, my Chinese audience, you can speak to Ludi. "If you say so," he said, somewhat flippantly. He had to be cavalier. It was the only way he could mask the bitterness sweeping over him. Felicity Featherington, Francesca said, motioning toward a very pretty young lady about 10 yards away. "She'd be an excellent choice. Very sensible. She won't fall in love with you." He looked down at her sardonically. "Heaven forbid I find love." Francesca's lips parted, and her eyes grew very wide. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "To find love?" She looked delighted by the prospect, delighted that he might find the perfect woman. And there it was, his faith in a higher power reaffirmed. Truly, moments of this ironic perfection could could not come about by accident. "Michael?" Francesca asked. Her eyes were bright and shining, and she clearly wanted something for him, something wonderful and good. And all he wanted was to scream. "I have no idea," he said caustically. "Not a single body clue." "Michael!" She looked stricken, but for once he didn't care. "If you will excuse me," he said sharply, "I believe I have a Featherington to dance with." "Michael, what is wrong?" she asked. "What did I say?" "Nothing," he said. "Nothing at all. Don't be this way." As he turned to her, he felt something rush over him, a numbness that somehow slid a mask back over his face, enabled him to smile smoothly and regard her with his legendary heavy-lidded stare. He was once again the red, maybe not so merry, but every bit the urban seducer. What about this story? Yeah, this is from Bridgerton story. If you watch Bridgerton on Netflix, then this is the novel. This is the original version, and I found that they are quite different. I mean, the novel and the movie are quite different ya, berbeda antara novel dan film-filmnya itu kadang-kadang kayak terlalu modern apa ya, terlalu terlihat kalau itu film gitu loh. Terlihat kalau itu dibuat-buat gitu loh. Jadi tidak apa namanya, tidak seperti yang ada di novel gitulah. Kadang-kadang ya alur cerita besarnya sih sama, tapi ini kan kalau yang mau tampil di Netflix itu ya, ini kemarin malah sudah Colin dan Penelope sudah kan. Besok itu mau Benedict sama Sophie, tapi Benedict sama Sophie itu kalau di buku itu seri yang ketiga. Jadi pertama kan Daphne, kedua kan Anthony kan, ketiga itu Benedict sama Sophie harusnya ya. Lebay begitu. Gimana ya? Pokoknya tidak sama. Pokoknya menurut SI for One itu tidak terlalu menggambarkan Inggris pada masa-masa itu. Harusnya pada masa itu tidak se apa ya, tidak semodern itu gitu loh. Apa ya, pergaulan mereka kan dulu kan masih sangat terbatas sekali, tapi yang di film itu sangat-sangat malah kayak film zaman sekarang gitu loh. Cuman settingnya dibuat masa lalu, tapi ini ya kurang kurang pas, beda lah pokoknya. Mungkin teman-teman yang sudah pernah nonton film Pride and Prejudice atau Sense and Sensibility itu tahu maksud saya ya. Halo, waalaikumsalam Ludi. Ask permission to rest. Bye bye Ludi, thank you for joining. Tugiem Senja, assalamualaikum Kak Prima, selamat pagi juga Tugiem. Ini saya lagi coba baca novel ya. Ini saya baru pertama kali memanfaatkan feature screencast. Jadi kita bisa share apa yang ada di layar kita gitu ya. Okay, let me continue reading ya. Okay. What way? He asked, his lips twisting with a perfect mix of innocence and contention. I'm doing exactly what you asked of me. Dance with the Bridgerton, didn't you say? I'm following your instructions to the letter. You're angry with me, she whispered. Of course not, he said. But they both knew his voice was too easy to swerve. I've merely accepted that you, Francesca, know best. Here I've been listening to my own mind and conscience all this time. But to what avail? Heaven knows where I'd be if I'd listened to you years ago. Jasamu tiada tara. Terima kasih. Wow. You're welcome, Bu Guru. Jasamu tiada tara. Amin ya rabbal alamin. What can I say more about good words? Yeah. Amin ya rabbal alamin. Her heart gasped across her lips and she drew back. I need to go, she said. Go then, she said. Her chin lifted a notch. There are many men here, very many. I need to find a husband. You should, he agreed. Her lips pressed together and then she added, I might find one tonight. He almost gave her a mocking smile. She always had to have the last word. You might, he said. At the very second, he knew. She thought the conversation... apa tahu ini ya Allah. Oh, I don't want the explanation, please. She thought the conversation had concluded. Hi, thank you for coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Although I just read like this, yeah. By then, she was just far enough away that she couldn't yell back one last retort. But he saw the way she paused and tensed her shoulders, and he knew she'd hurt him. He leaned back against the wall and smiled. One had to take one's simple pleasures where one could. The next day, Francesca felt perfectly horrid, and worse, she couldn't quell an extremely annoying quiver or guilt, even though Michael was the one who'd spoken so insultingly the night before. Truly, what had she said to provoke such an unkind reaction on this part? And what right did he have to act so badly toward her? As she had once expressed a bit of joy that he might want to find a true and loving marriage rather than spend his days in shallow debauchery. Sehat-sehat di sana, jaga kesehatan Kak di sana. Yulah, aku akan tetap di sini temani. Wow, terima kasih. To Giam Sanja, thank you very 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 much. But apparently she'd been wrong. Michael had spent the entire night, both before and after their conversation, charming every woman at the party. It had gotten to the point where she had thought she might be ill. But the worst of it was she couldn't seem to stop herself from counting his conquests, just as she predicted the night before. 1, 2, 3, she'd murmured, watching him enchant a trio of sisters with his smile. 4, 5, 6. There went 2 widows and a countess. It was disgusting, and Francesca was disgusted with herself for having been so mesmerized. And then every now and then he'd look at her, just look at her with a heavy-lidded, mocking stare, and she couldn't help but think that he knew what she was doing, that he was moving from woman to woman, so that she could round her count up to the next dozen or so. Why had she said that? What had she been thinking? Or had she been thinking not at all? It seemed the only explanation. She certainly hadn't intended to tell him that she wouldn't be able to stop herself from tallying his broken heart. The words had whispered over her lips before she'd even realized she was thinking them. And even now, she wasn't sure what it meant. Why did she care? Why on earth did she care how many ladies fell under his spell? She'd never cared before. It was only going to get worse too. The women were mad for Michael. If the rules of society were reversed, Francesca thought wryly, their drawing room at Kilmartin House would be overflowing with flowers, all addressed to the dashing Earl. It was still going to be dreadful. She would be inundated with visitors today. Of that she was certain. Every woman in London would call upon her in hopes that Michael might stroll through the drawing room. Francesca was going to have to endure countless questions, occasional innuendo, and good heavens! Good heavens, she stopped short, peering into the drawing room with curious eyes. What is all this? Flowers everywhere. It was her nightmare come true, Had someone changed the rules of society and forgotten to tell her? Violet irises and daisies, imported tulips, hothouse orchid, and roses. Roses everywhere. Of every color, the smell was almost overwhelming. Prettily, Francesca called out, spying her butler across the room, settling a tall vase of snapdragons on the table. What are all these flowers? He gave the face he gave the vase one last adjustment, twisting one pink stalk so that it faced away from the wall, then turned and walked toward her. They are for you, my lady, she blinked. Me? Indeed. Would you care to read the cards? I have left them on the arrangements so that you would be able to identify each sender. Oh, it seemed all she could say. She felt rather a simpleton, with her hand over her opened mouth, glancing back and forth at all the flowers. If you'd like, Priestley continued, I could remove each card and note on the back which arrangement I took it from. Then you could read through them all at once. When Francesca didn't reply, he suggested, perhaps you would like to remove yourself to your desk. I would be happy to bring you the cards. Hi, Ichirika. No, no, she said, still feeling terribly distracted by all this. She was a widow, for heaven's sake. Men weren't supposed to bring her flower, were they? My lady, she turned to Priestley, straightening her spine as she forced her mind back to clarity, or tried. I will just have a look at. She turns to the nearest bouquet, a lovely and delicate arrangement of grape hyacinths and stephanotis, a pale comparison to your eyes. The card read, it was signed by the Marquess of Chester. Chester. Oh, Francesca gasped. Lord Chester's wife had died 2 years earlier. Everyone knew he was looking for a new bride. Barely able to contain the odd giddy feeling rising within her, she inched down toward an arrangement of roses and picked up the card, trying very hard not to appear too eager in front of the butler. I wonder who this is from, she said with studied casualness. A sonnet from Shakespeare, if she remembered correctly, signed by Viscount Travelstam. Travelstam? They had only been introduced but once. He was young, very handsome, and it was rumored that his father had squandered away most of the family fortune. The new Viscount would have to marry someone wealthy, or so everyone said. Good heavens! Francesca turned to see Janet behind her. What is this? She asked. I do believe those were my exact words upon entering the room, Francesca murmured. She handed Janet 2 cards, then watched her carefully as her eyes scanned the neatly handwritten lines. Janet had lost her only child when John had died. How would she react to Francesca being wooed by other men? My goodness, Janet said, looking up. You seem to be this season's incomparable. Oh, don't be silly, Francesca said, blushing. Blushing? Good God, what's wrong with her? She didn't blush. She hadn't even blushed during her first season, when she really had been an incomparable. I'm far too old for that, she mumbled. Apparently not. There are more in the hall, Priestley said. Janet turned to Francesca. Have you looked through all the cards? Not yet, but I imagine that there are more of the same. Francesca nodded. Does that bother you? Janet smiled sadly, but her eyes were kind and wise. Do I wish you were still married to my son? Of course I do. Do I want you to spend the rest of your life married to his memory? Of course not. She reached out and clasped one of Francesca's hands in her own. You are a darling to me, Francesca. I want you to be happy. I would never dishonor John's memory, Francesca assured her. Of course not. If you were the sort who would, he never have married you in the first place, or she added with a sly look, I would never have allowed him to. I would like children, Francesca said. Somehow she felt the need to explain it to make sure that Janet understood what she truly wanted was to be a mother, not necessarily a wife. Janet nodded, turning away as she dabbed her. She dabbed at her eyes with her fingertips. What should read the rest of this card? We should read. Yeah. Okay, I will move my position because I'm a bit tired. Mm. Okay, let's continue reading. We should read the rest of these cards, she said, her brisk tone signaling that she'd like to move on and perhaps prepare ourselves for an onslaught of afternoon calls. Francesca followed her as she kecil banget ya tulisannya ya. Enakan pakai tablet tapi tabletnya tadi tuh tidak bisa buat nge-live. Sayang banget. She said, her brisk tone signaling that she'd like to move on and perhaps prepare ourselves for an onslaught of afternoon calls. Francesca followed her as she sought out an enormous display of tulips and plucked the card free. I rather think the colors will be women, Francesca said, inquiring after Michael. You might be right, Janet replied. She held the card up. May I? Of course. Janet scanned the words and then looked up and said, Cheshire. Francesca gasped, as in the Duke of the very one. Francesca actually placed her hand over her heart. My word, she breathed. The Duke of Cheshire. Yes, you, my dear, are clearly the catch of the season. But what the devil is. It was Michael catching a vase. It nearly overturned and looking extremely cross and pulled out. Good morning, Michael, Janet said cheerfully. He nodded at her, then turned to Francesca and grumbled, You look as if you're about to pledge allegiance to your sovereign lord. And would you? And that would be you, I imagine. She sat back, quickly dropping her hand to her side. She hadn't even realized it was still over her heart. If you're lucky, he muttered. Francesca just gave him a look. He smirked right back in return. And are we opening a flower shop? No, but clearly we would, Janet replied. Therefore, Francesca, she added happily. Of course, therefore, Francesca, she muttered. Although, good God, I don't know who would be idiot enough to send roses. I like roses, Francesca said. Everyone sends roses, he said dismissively. They're trite and old, and emotions through travel stamps, yellow ones. Who sent this? Travel stamp, Janet answered. Michael let out a snort and swung around to face Francesca. You're not going to marry him, are you? Probably not, but I failed to see what. He hasn't 2 shillings to rub together, he said. How would you know? Francesca asked. You haven't even been back a month. Michael shrugged. I've been to my club. Well, it may be true, but it is hardly his fault, Francesca felt compelled to point out. Not that she felt any great loyalty to Lord Travelstam, but still she did try to be fair, and it was common knowledge that the young Viscount had spent the last year trying to repair the damage his profligate father had done to the family fortunes. You're not marrying him, and that's final, Michael announced. She should have been annoyed by his arrogance, but the truth was, she was mostly just amused. Good, he grunted. She has many to choose from, Janet put in. Indeed, Michael said caustically. I'm going to have to find Helen, Janet said. She won't want to miss this. I hardly think the flowers are going to fly out the window before she rises, Michael said. Of course not, Janet replied sweetly, giving him a motherly pat of the arm. Francesca quickly swallowed a laugh. Michael would hate that, and Janet knew it. She does adore her flowers, though, Janet said. May I take one of the arrangements up to her? Of course, Francesca replied. Janet reached for travel stamps, roses, then she stopped herself. Oh no, I had better not, she said. Good morning, Shanum Cantik. Tadi baca keras, sekarang udah capek ya. Baca pelan, baca dalam hati aja ya. Marriage, she said. Your point. I don't know if you had thought about it, but I'd naturally assumed you would be there. You would be the one to be relentlessly pursued. I never dreamed that I would, well, emerge as a prize to be won. Well, well, yes, I suppose. Chapter 12. Oke, mungkin sudah dulu ya live-nya ya. Thank you for coming. Terima kasih yang sudah menemani sampai saat ini. Nanti saya mau coba lagi melakukan hal lain lagi, doing other things with this screencast features ya. Nanti saya akan coba lagi. Oke, now for now kita stop dulu. Thank you very much. Goodbye and wassalamualaikum.